Cast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining today's Teach in Spain Visa webinar. Before we get started, I just want to double check that the sound is working properly. So if you can hear me okay, do you mind typing yes into the questions box? Okay, awesome. I'm going to give us about one more minute before we get started, just to let a few more people join the webinar, and then we'll go ahead and get going. All right, hello everyone, and welcome to today's informational webinar on obtaining a visa to teach in Spain with CIEE. My name is Samantha, and I'm the coordinator for the Teach in Spain programs. Most of you have, been hearing from me these past few months, emailing back and forth, letting you know everything you're going to be needing. I am your main point of contact here up until you depart for Spain this upcoming fall. So any questions that you may have, as we move forward with the process, today specifically is going to be the visa process, but as we move forward, anything else, you're always welcome to reach out to me as well. During the webinar, we're going to go through basically what the Spain Visa Guide entails, and we're going to kind of go through some of those things step by step so that you have an idea of what you need to do. You can ask questions along the way through the questions box at any time. I'll try to go ahead and answer questions as we move through each subject line. If it's a question that I know I'll pick up here in a little bit, I may, not answer it right away. And we'll kind of go through it. At the end, I will also open it up for a Q&A, so you can ask questions at that time as well. This webinar is also being recorded, and so I will, make sure that everybody can have access to this webinar recording. It probably will be about a week or two. I won't be able to get that to you right away, but I will try to get that to you as soon as possible so that you can go back and look it over. So let's start with what type of visa do you need? Depending on your consulate, you will either be applying for a long stay student visa or a language and culture assistant visa. The latter being a type of student visa. So a language and culture assistant visa is a type of student visa. There really is no difference between these visas except for the name. I mean, they have all the same permissions. They need all the same documents. There really is no specific difference. It just depends on what your consulate offers. You'll be applying for the long stay student visa if your consulate is in Boston, New York, Washington, D.C., or Miami. And then additionally, if your consulate is in San Francisco, Los Angeles, Chicago, or Houston, you will be applying for a language and culture assistant visa. Please keep in mind that you are not applying for a work visa. You are applying for a student visa as a language and culture assistant, or also known as an auxiliar. At your consular appointment, just make sure that you're using language to make it clear that you're applying for a language and culture assistant, or to be a language and culture assistant, especially those of you that are applying for a student visa. Just make that clear with them. The visa itself will be affixed to a page in your passport, so just be sure that you have a blank passport page available. The visa will say that it's only good for 3 months, which is totally normal, or it'll say 90 days. Once you are in Spain, CIEE will help you to convert it to a foreigner's residency card, or a TA. This TA is going to be valid until the end of your program. And so for participants that are placed in the region of Madrid, your residency card is going to be valid until the end of June 2019. And for participants placed in Andalusia, where the school year is shorter, your residency card will be valid until the end of May 2019. Many of you ask, once my residency card expires, does that mean I have to leave the country, leave the Schengen zone, leave the EU? No. So after your residency card expires, so you have your visa, which you're going to turn into a residency card. That'll be done. That'll be good until either May or June, depending on your region. And then after that is basically when, if you decide not to renew, if you just decide to maybe do some traveling for the next few months, that's totally fine, because then your passport as a tourist is going to kick back in, and you're going to have an additional 90 days before you actually have to leave the European Union. Something also that I wanted to add that might be confusing to participants that I've seen is just remember that the days and the dates are written differently in Spain and just Europe in general. You're usually going to see day, month, year. So don't be alarmed if you see a specific date. You can see on the screen under España, it says 23-09-12. And so that is the date is September 23rd, 2012. And then about after 4 to 6 weeks after your consular appointment, your passport will be returned to you, depending on your consulate, which I will explain in a little bit. Either your passport and visa will be mailed to you, or you will have to pick it up in person. So let's go through the process a little bit. The first step in applying for your visa is going to determine which consulate's jurisdiction covers your address, and then to make an appointment with them. You will need to prove that you have an address in the consulate's jurisdiction, and this can be done with your driver's license, state ID, or student ID. Some participants may live in one state and go to school in another where the consulate's jurisdictions, are different. In that case, as long as both forms of ID are still valid, you can essentially choose which consulate is easiest for you. You can find out which consulate you need to apply at and how to schedule an appointment by starting on page 4 through 9, so starting on page 4 of your Spain visa guide. Your Spain visa guide is also located under the reading section of your My CIE application, and so you can always view the Spain visa guide there. And I've also sent it out multiple times via email, a link to it as well. So just to learn how to, where your consulate is and when to make an appointment, start on page 4, and you'll find that information for your consulate. Something that's going to be for lucky people is if you are in Washington, D.C. or Miami, then you do not have to schedule an appointment. Again, in the visa guide, you can view your consulate's hours. I just try to recommend, for those of you that don't have to schedule appointments, is to arrive as early as possible, as some of the consulates have been known to turn away people at closing time, regardless of whether they're in line before they closed. So get there early. That's going to be the best one for you. I have some participants that are asking, about the specific consulates. You can only go to the consulates, the 8 consulates that are provided for you in the Spain visa guide. Any other consulate that you're seeing that may be a Spanish consulate, it's most likely an honorary consulate. You cannot get a visa at an honorary consulate. You have to go to the consulates that are in the Spain visa guide that tell you, based off your state, which jurisdiction that you're in. Additionally, if you have a state or a student ID that doesn't necessarily show the address of your school, as long as it has the school name on it, it's going to show, prove that your residence is in that state. They'll be able to know what state that school is in. So it's okay if the state or the student ID does not have a physical address on it, like a mailing address. That's totally okay. As long as the name of the school is on there, including your name, and it is still valid, then you'll be okay. So next on the list is going to be to make sure that you've gathered all the necessary visa application documents before your appointment. Make sure to double check with the CIE visa guide and your consulate's website, just to make sure that you have all those required documents. You will then attend your appointment and turn in your application. The appointment itself, it's usually very quick. I'd say it maybe takes 15 minutes from the time that you're actually being seen. Usually they'll call your name, verify that you've brought all the correct documents. They might ask you a couple questions about your plans in Spain, and just let them know that you're going there to be a language and culture assistant. As long as you have all the required documents, there's really no need to be worried or to be nervous. Just again, recommend that you get there a little bit earlier than your appointment, just in case there are cancellations, and then they can see you earlier. And then unfortunately, likewise, keep in mind that they may also be behind as well. A lot of the consulates are understaffed, and so it's always best just to be polite and respectful of their time. I would even do kind of an added piece to that is just make sure when you are going to the consulate and you're having your consular appointment or going in, if you're Washington, D.C. or Miami, just going in, make sure you're dressing appropriately. Don't visit in your sweatpants and your tank top or something like that. You don't have to dress fancy, but just, look decent. Jeans should be fine. No holes in your pants, flip-flops, things like that. Just make sure that you're looking proper and that you're being polite and respectful to the representatives at the consulate. About 4 to 6 weeks after the consulate appointment, you can expect to receive your passport with the attached visa back. Most consulates will mail your visa back to you if you include a self-addressed, prepaid Priority Express mail envelope. However, and I'm so sorry, but the Boston, New York, Los Angeles, and San Francisco consulates will not mail your passport back to you. I'm going to share more details on this in some of the later slides, just so that you know kind of what are your options then. Okay, so right now it's important to make an appointment online for your consulate, and you're going to want to make sure that the appointment is for the correct type of visa. Remember, you're getting a student visa, not a work visa. So a lot of times on the consulate's websites, it asks you to choose which type, whether it be a tourism visa, work visa, student visa. You're getting a student visa. I think the exception would be, I want to say San Francisco consulate actually has you type in what type of a visa it is, and in that case, you can put language and culture assistant. So on the screen, you can see the recommended time frame. There are a few reasons why we've given this recommended time frame. The first one is going to be because most consulates do not accept visa appointments if they're more than 90 days from the program start date. You may not know official program dates yet. We will offer those when we have placements here in the next week or two. However, we've created these timeframes knowing kind of an idea of when the appointments and when the program start dates are going to be. And so we've made sure that we stayed within that 90-day mark. So some of you that might want to apply earlier, you just got to make sure you're in that 90-day mark. And so follow the guidelines on the screen for the time frame. The other reason why we chose the time frame is because you're going to be receiving some important documents, and they're going to be coming directly from the Ministry of Education. The specific document is going to be your letter of acceptance, or in Spanish, it's known as Carta de Nombramiento. And so this letter is going to be coming to you, typically it's like the first or second week in June. The Ministry of Education will email it to you directly. Unfortunately, we're kind of, at the mercy of the Spanish bureaucracy and how fast they work. We can encourage them to get things to you as soon as possible, but unfortunately, we cannot make it happen any sooner. And so you have to wait until the first or second week of June when they officially send that information to you. And so that's, again, why we've set the earliest date to be June 18th, because at that point, we're confident that you're going to receive that letter of acceptance in time. The final reason, and that this one is going to kind of be the end date of each time frame for each program, and it's because consulates usually take 4 to 6 weeks to process your visa. And so we've created these times so that you have enough kind of wiggle room or buffer room before you actually depart for your program. Often, I think it's the Boston and Los Angeles consulates right now are having, a lot of participants are having a really hard time with appointments. Often there will not be appointments at the exact time that you want, so just make sure that you make an appointment for when is available and then just reschedule it. It's definitely easier to, I would say, reschedule the appointment than just keep kind of waiting and then not having anything at all. I would check back, for those of you that are having a hard time finding appointments, just check back frequently. I would do it a few times a week to see if you can get an appointment at the appropriate time. As we're heading into the month of May and soon into June, I would make sure even checking every day would be the best option for you. Consulates often have cancellations, or they add new appointments on a rolling basis. And so, or sometimes I guess they even add, appointments to their schedule just a couple weeks in advance or a couple of days. So just keep checking something will come up. I know this is a stressful process and that, many of you have full-time jobs, you have to buy plane tickets, things like that. But just know that all of our participants in the past have had success getting good appointments with dedication and persistence. We send over 600 participants to Spain each year, and all of them have had success getting consulate appointments and getting their visas. And so it is possible to stay patient and be persistent. Real quick too, as I mentioned earlier, Washington, D.C. and Miami consulates do not need to make an appointment. Just make sure that you're still reading the visa guide so that you know what documents you need for that consular visit. Please read through the visa guide for more specific details on all the required documents that you need to apply for your visa, but I do have here a quick checklist for your convenience. There is a more detailed version of this checklist available on the last page of your Spain visa guide. This is going to be page 22, very last page. You can print it off, save it to use it for reference to be able to check off, make sure you have everything you need for your appointment. So for your application for either long-term student visa or a language and culture assistant visa, this is what you're going to be needing. So the first one is an appointment, which we kind of went over just now. Washington, D.C. and Miami do not need appointments. And so if you're in one of those consulates, jurisdictions, you're lucky. The rest of you, set an appointment now. Many times those consulates fill up, as I mentioned with Los Angeles and Boston. And so just get an appointment as soon as possible. Keep checking and work towards that. And then just make sure you're staying within the time frame recommended in the visa guide as well. The next piece is your national visa application form. I would recommend filling this out by hand and make sure it's in blue or black ink and try to print it in capital letters. You don't want to have any errors, especially when you're writing in your name and things like that. You want to make sure everything is as clear as possible. So just use printed capital letters. It's usually the safest way to do that. The visa application is going to ask for, personal information. It's going to ask for your name, your date of birth, program information. We do have a line-by-line instruction guide on pages 20 and 21 of your visa guide. And again, your visa guide is under the reading section of your MyCIE account. There will be some differences if you are placed in Andalusia versus Madrid. And those differences are going to be highlighted in blue in this line-by-line instruction page. You're going to find out placements here in the next week or two, and so you'll be able to input that information if you've started working on this visa application form. But there'll be line-by-line instructions, pages 20 and 21 of the visa guide. An added piece to this as well is the Boston consulate also requires a supplemental form, which there is a link to this in the Spain visa guide as well, and it's just an additional form that you'll have to complete with your national visa application form. This is for the Boston consulate only. The next thing on the list is going to be a money order. Most of the consulates or all of the consulates will accept a money order for $160. You're going to want to make those payable to the Consulate General of Spain. There are a few consulates that will accept cash. As far as I know, the San Francisco, Houston, and Washington, D.C. will accept exact cash. The safest bet is usually to do a money order. You can do that at your bank. They may or may not charge you a fee. Some banks do it for free. My local bank charges $4 for a money order, and basically it's just a guaranteed check. Looks like a check, and it's just you're paying that cash up front, and then you have that form. The next thing that you're going to need is going to be your passport, and just remember it's going to take up a whole passport page, so make sure you have a whole page available, especially if you've been doing a lot of traveling. And then again, make sure that your visa is valid until at least January 2020. It has to be valid for at least 6 months after your program return date. And so that would lead you at about January 2020. If your passport is about to expire, make sure you're working on getting that renewed before you have your consular appointment. And then again, make sure that it's signed as well. You'd be surprised at how many participants do forget to sign that. So just make sure that your passport is signed. The next thing that you're going to want to make sure to have is going to be a copy of your driver's license or your state ID or your student ID. What matters is that you want to make sure that this address or this information matches your consulate's jurisdiction. So if you go to school in one state and you live in another where you have different jurisdictions, and say both of your IDs are valid, your student ID is valid and your driver's license ID is valid, then you can really choose whichever consulate you want to go to. I would just look at things like, does my consulate mail my visa back? Do I have to, fly if I'm staying, if I'm going to go to the place where my school is, but I return home for the summer, am I going to have to fly back? You have to just think about things like that to figure out what's going to be the most cost-effective decision for you for choosing which consulate if you have that choice. And then whichever consulate you choose, just make sure that you're choosing the proper supporting documents and that they're done in the same state as that jurisdiction. So if you go to school in California and you're going to go to Los Angeles consulate, but maybe you are from Illinois, you're going to want to make sure your background check is from the state of California because you're going to the California consulate. The next thing on the list is you're going to want at least 2 passport photos. Make sure they are professionally taken. Don't try to do them at home. It gets messier, and this way you're confident that they will be, that they will suffice. You're definitely going to need to bring more to Spain with you, so I would recommend when you're getting your passport photos taken to do, get at least 4 to 6 of those taken at a time. You should only need about 2 for your visa appointment, but you're going to want to take additional ones to Spain with you. You're going to need those to set up your residency card, to get your transportation card, things like that. So just make sure you have extras to bring with you to Spain. You can get your passports photos taken at, I think most FedEx and UPS stores have it. Pharmacies, places like Walgreens, CVS, Rite Aid, they're going to have places for you to go ahead and get passport photos taken. And they're about anywhere from $5 to $15 for a set of like 2 or 4. For the passport photos, these can be recent photos. So these are going to be, passport-sized photos. I think those are 2 by 2 inches, passport-sized photos that you're going to bring with you, and you're going to have to either glue or paperclip onto your visa application. And so that's the point of the photo. It does not have to match your actual passport photo. It just has to be a passport-sized photo. Obviously the newer, the better, because they want to see what you look like now, and it's meant for your visa and your residency cards. The next thing on the list, which I'm going to expand a little bit further as well in the following slides, but just to get this quick overview of what's needed for your application, is the medical letter. So this is different than the CIEE medical form, and I'll clear that up as well in the following slides. But the medical letter is going to be a signed letter from your doctor, and it's basically just going to say that you're free of any contagious diseases. You don't have measles, you don't have anything like that, and that you're safe to travel. Most of the consulates do require that it is signed by a medical doctor. So if you have, maybe you go to a nurse practitioner, physician's assistant, something like that, I would recommend trying to make sure that a doctor is signing it, because a lot of the consulates do specify that in their application. They also, for the medical letter, some consulates will require that it be translated. The Miami, Chicago, Houston, San Francisco, and Los Angeles consulates require the Spanish translations. The nice thing is you don't have to pay to get it translated somewhere. Most of these consulates are going to offer a template that's going to have the English version on top and the Spanish version on the bottom. Have your doctor sign both of those versions, and that's your translated version. And then again, I'll explain a little bit further in the next upcoming slides. So the next thing on the list is going to be the state-level criminal background check, and with an apostille attached to it. Some of the consulates do require Spanish translations. The Boston, Miami, and Los Angeles consulates require Spanish translations for the state-level background check. And then again, in the next couple slides, I'll explain much more in-depthly on this state-level background check for you guys. The next on the list is the official letter of appointment, or as I had mentioned, is your carta de nombramiento. So once participants, or once you confirm your placement, we're going to go ahead and send this confirmed list to the ministry. They're then going to process everything on their end, and then they're going to email you this official letter. I cannot guarantee when this letter is going to come. It's, kind of, as I mentioned before, we're at the mercy of when the Spanish, Ministry of Education works through this. Typically, it happens the first or second week in June. And again, that's why you can't have your consulate appointment any earlier, because you're waiting on this official letter. Once we do know that participants are starting to receive this letter, we will go ahead and send a mass email to everybody just to keep an eye out for it, just so that they know it is on their way, or it is on the way. Something we've noticed in the past is that participants with EDU or university email addresses, they do tend to get, the letter does tend to get sent to the spam folder, or sometimes just automatically blocked out completely. So if possible, we do recommend that you try to use a Gmail account, or maybe an Outlook, Yahoo, something like that. There's just the university's spam blockers are usually really strong, and so sometimes they filter these out. So you'll want to definitely be careful if you choose to keep your university email. If you would like to update your email address, you can email me specifically, and I'll go ahead and update it on my end. Unfortunately, it's something you cannot do on your end, but we can update it as well. Once you get this letter from the Ministry of Education, it's going to be via email. You're going to print it off, and you're going to bring that with you to your consular appointment, and that's going to be your official letter of acceptance. The next thing on the list is going to be your proof of health insurance. If you are a U.S. resident, we will get this for you. So the next few things you don't quite have to worry about. So the letter of health insurance, your proof of health insurance, and your financial means letter is going to be a letter that CIEE is going to send you. It is going to be a notarized, signed letter on CIEE letterhead, and so it's going to be sent to you in the mail. Because this is a notarized document, it's important that you do not lose it. If you lose it, then we have to send you a new hard copy, as it cannot be digitally sent because it is a notarized letter. And so, just we'll let you know when we mail this out, but when you get it, make sure you keep it in a safe place, because if you lose it the day before your consular appointment, it's going to be difficult for us to get that to you in a day. So just make sure you have it in a safe place. We'll be sending those letters out once you confirm your placement. So there's nothing you need to do to request it. We'll send it to you automatically. This is a good time to mention as well that, so all of the information that you input into your CIEE profile, your first and last name, your email address, your permanent mailing address, we pull all of that information, and that's how we, send your email to the Ministry of Education, so they know who to send the letter of appointment to. Your permanent address indicated in your application, that's what we send your official proof of health insurance and financial means letter. So just make sure that when you're signing into your application the next time, that everything is up to date. You're going to want to make sure your first and last name is your legal first and last name. Don't have to worry about your middle name, but make sure that the name on your application is the name on your passport, because that's information we're pulling when we're getting all of the information for your placement and sending it to the ministry. Oh, and unfortunately, our Canadian residents, you do need to provide your own proof of insurance. Unfortunately, the CIE iNext insurance does not cover you for health insurance. You will have to get separate insurance for that. For your consulate appointment, your CIE iNext insurance for U.S. residents is going to cover that financial requirement. It's still definitely recommended that you bring a primary insurance, that you have a primary insurance from home, because as a reminder, your iNext insurance does not cover any preventative care, any monthly medications that you have, and things like that. But if you become ill or hurt or injured or anything like that abroad, your iNext insurance is going to cover you, and so it will suffice for the visa requirement. The next thing on the list is going to be a self-addressed return envelope, and you're going to want to make sure that has priority postage and a tracking number. That's the biggest thing too, because if you're going to be sending, your passport with your visa and all of that, you're going to want to make sure that you know where it is at all times, especially when it's being sent back to you, so that you can make sure you can get to Spain on time. Unfortunately, the Boston, New York, and Los Angeles consulates do not mail your passport back. You must pick it up in person. There is an exception with the San Francisco consulate. They still will not mail your passport back. However, you can pick it up in person, or you can provide a return envelope, a prepaid one, and they will mail it to the honorary consulate in Washington State or Alaska. Unfortunately, that is the only consulate that will do that. We have reached out to the Los Angeles consulate and the Boston consulate to see if they are willing to do this as well, mailing it out to honorary consulates, but unfortunately, they will not. So only the San Francisco consulate will do this. You can find an example of the return envelope that we recommend. Most consulates do prefer the USPS Express envelope, which there is an example in your visa guide on page 17. And then with all of this information or all of these documents that you have, you're going to want to make sure that you have at least, I would say even at least 2 sets of copies for everything. Most consulates are going to require the original plus 1 copy, but then you're also going to want to make sure that you have a copy for yourself to keep on file just in case. It's extremely important to do that yourself. So have the original for the consulate, a copy for the consulate, but additionally an original for yourself. There's a few additional things specific to just a few of the consulates. San Francisco only does require a screenshot of intended flight itinerary. There is a sample of this on page 16 in the visa guide. Again, this is for San Francisco only. It seems really silly. I don't understand why they do it. None of the other consulates have it, but San Francisco does require it, and it literally just has to be a screenshot of intended flight itinerary, just showing that you know how to do it. The Los Angeles consulate has a signed disclaimer that they also need to have turned in with the application documents. And then the Boston, as I mentioned before, has a supplemental visa document that they need you to fill out. Again, just all of this and even a more detailed version of this is going to be on page 22 of your visa guide. Always as well, refer to your consulate for the most accurate information. We do try to send updates and we keep an eye on the websites and on the consulate's pages, and we let everybody know if there's ever a big change, but it's also best to make sure that you're also comparing the consulate's website as well. The visa guide is meant to be there as a guide to help you through that process, and so just make sure that you're keeping track of everything. Okay, so I'm going to go a little bit more in depth into some of the more complicated documents for everybody. So the first one is going to be the background check or your police record. So it's important to know that, what type of background check you're going to need. Criminal background checks are available at the local, the state, and federal levels. However, consulates will not accept a local level background check. This is usually considered like a county level background check. So for the purpose of your visa application, you're going to want either a state level background check or an FBI level background check. An FBI level background check is one that's going to cover the entire country. So it's going to cover all of the states. I would say that, FBI background checks can take a long time. I would say they probably take up to 4 to 6 weeks, and they do usually cost more. So I do recommend, if possible, to do a state level background check. It's usually easier, quicker, and cheaper. Something that I've received, many times before is, what if I've lived in other states? You still only need one background check. Consulates are only going to know where you have lived unless you tell them. So whatever address you're using to prove your jurisdiction, whether it be your school or your home address, just get the background check for that state. For example, if you live in California, but maybe you go to school in Chicago, you're just going to have to decide if you want to stay in Chicago over the summer and apply for your visa there. In that case, you'll want to use your student ID and apply for a background check for the state of Illinois. If you plan to maybe move back home for the summer, you're going to, I would recommend applying for a California background check and then just using your state ID or driver's license for proof of either, Los Angeles or San Francisco jurisdictions. I don't really recommend getting multiple background checks because seriously, consulates rarely, if at all, ask. And we've never had a participant come to us saying that the consulate asked them for more than one background check. So you're going to be just fine with the one. If you are really worried, you can always get an FBI level background check. Just keep in mind that they are going to take a little bit longer and they're usually more expensive to secure as well. Most of the background checks, or most of the consulates, are going to require that you get background checks verified by fingerprints. This can either be done on the application itself. You can use a separate fingerprint card, or Recently, they have live scan where you can do like an electronic version of your fingerprints. These are all fine ways to do it. Just make sure that you are getting paper results that are usually signed, have an official signature or a stamp on them. If you do decide to get fingerprints with a fingerprint card, I would highly recommend getting a couple sets done to send in with your application, because if there's a smudge or something just doesn't work on that original one, then you're going to be falling behind by a few weeks. I've had this issue before myself when I was studying abroad in college, and they didn't notify me that that my fingerprints didn't work. And so you're just going to want to make sure you submit a few extra copies to be safe. The biggest thing I would say, with getting a background check is that you're going to want to make sure you can get an apostille on it. And I'm going to go over an apostille in the following slide, in the next slides as well. But just to make sure, what you're going to want to do is just call the office that processes the background checks and just ask them if you can get a notarized version, or just make sure that there is going to be some sort of official seal on it. And then usually that's going to be a good indicator that you're going to be able to get an apostille on it, and you're going to send it off to your Secretary of State. And as long as they put an apostille on it, then it's going to be fine. It is difficult, I don't know the rules for all of the states. And so, I can't necessarily verify that your check will work. I can help, but I can't. So the best way to really make sure that you are getting the proper background check is just to, check with your local state of police and your Secretary of Office. You're just going to want to double check with them. But I would say as long as your background check has a seal or an ink signature, you're going to be fine. Oh, additionally, where do you get a state level background check? If you go to pages 13 and 14 of your Spain visa guide, there's going to be a link, and it's going to give you a link to each of the states and their corresponding, usually state police location. The links were updated as of April. If for some reason the links are broken or they're invalid, just Google criminal background check and your state. So somebody is asking, a participant's asking if, how do we prove that it was done by fingerprints? Because a lot of times when you get a fingerprint background check, they don't mail you the background checks or the fingerprints back. They're going to, just send you the results. So most of the time the results are going to have, the form that you filled out. And then on top of that is going to be like a signed letter that just says, John Smith was reviewed, criminal record using fingerprints, or in some states, maybe it's name-based search, but it'll indicate on the letter if it was through fingerprints or just a name-based search. And so that'll be your proof that you got a fingerprint-based search. Where do you get your fingerprints done? So usually this is kind of all done at the same time. It just depends. A lot of times you can go to your local police station. They'll have fingerprint cards, get a few fingerprint cards done, and then follow the link for your state's background check to see, if usually it's just printing out a form, including fingerprints, sending a money order and mailing it off, and you'll get your results back. It just depends on your specific state. So check the link for your state, and those should be instructions as far as where to get your fingerprints, how to get them, and what sort of information you need to submit to receive that background check. Something to keep in mind is that the background check will not be turned into CIEE. So when you're filling out the application, for your background check, just make sure that the results are being mailed to you, because you need them to get them sent off to get authenticated with an apostille, and then you're going to take it to your visa appointment. So if when you apply for the background check, they ask for an employer ID code or an address, just explain to them that you're applying for a visa and you need the results sent back to you directly. You should not need to give them any employer information. You should, if you haven't already, you should apply for your background check within the next few weeks. I would do that, as soon as possible. We recommend that you do not wait for your final placement assignment to apply for your background check. If you know you're going to move forward with the program, then I would start on it now, because depending on your state, depending on the type of background check you get, it can take a while. And so you're going to want to make sure you get working on that soon. The ministry in Spain now requires that all teachers bring a notarized copy of your background check with you. And so we recommend that you make a photocopy and have that notarized before you apply for your visa, as many consulates are not going to return your original background check to you. If your state gives you an extra copy of your background check, then you don't need a photocopy. You don't need a photocopy, you don't need to notarize it, you just bring that second copy with you to Spain. But in the case that they don't do that, when you get your original background check, make a copy of it, bring it to the bank or wherever there is a local notary, and have them notarize the copy of your background check. That one is going to be for you to bring to Spain. The original, and which we'll go over in the following slide, is going to be sent off to get an apostille attached to it. Some consulates require that you get a Spanish translation of your background check. As far as I'm aware, it's Boston, Miami, San Francisco, and Los Angeles that require official translations. This one is not as easy as the medical letter, because the medical letter offered a Spanish translation, but because of the background check is going to be unique to you and your results, you will have to pay to get an official translation. I cannot recommend a specific translation service. However, we have had past participants use the service on the screen, the www.rev.com/translation, and they have been really, really successful with this option. Once you get your background check, again, just make sure that you're getting a copy notarized for Spain and that you're getting an apostille attached. Again, I'd mentioned, for more information on obtaining a background check for your state, you can check the Spain Visa Guide. It's going to be available under the reading section of your application, and it's going to be on pages 13 and 14. You'll find the links for your state and how to get a background check. A lot of participants sometimes, maybe for their previous job, they had to get a background check, and so maybe they have one that's a few months old. It's probably not going to work because most consulates will not accept a background check that is more than 90 days old from the date of your consulate appointment. So just make sure that you're getting a new background check, even if you previously had gotten one for maybe a job or for teaching. Okay, so you've got your background check. Now what? After you've made and notarized your copy to bring with you to Spain, you're going to need to get an apostille on the original background check. So an apostille is essentially an international notarization. It's not something that you can go to the local bank and get. It's different. It's something that is going to be recognized by foreign countries as well. And what it is it's an official paper document that's attached to your background check, and it's required to certify the background check for the consulate. You can apply for the apostille by usually mailing in a request form, including a payment, and then the document that you need to be certified. I know usually in the request form, it's going to ask you which country you're requesting this for, and so you'll input Spain. In some states, you can bring it to the office in person, and you're going to be going to your Secretary of State. However, you will just need to research this independently, whether or not your state allows you to do it. State level apostilles are processed by your state Secretary of State. If you're getting an FBI level background check, then you're going to want to apply to the U.S. Department of State in Washington, D.C. The process for an apostille can take as little as an hour if you're going in person, or it could take up to a couple of weeks to process. The biggest thing to keep in mind, though, again, is if you're getting a state-level background check, so say you're getting a background check for the state of California, then you're going to go to the California Secretary of State to get an apostille attached. And with that, you're going to fill out the form. There is page 15 of the Spain Visa Guide. There is a list of Secretary of States for each state that you can click on and find out what their specific process is, but usually it's some sort of form that you're filling out. You're going to indicate which country it's for, which you'll indicate Spain. Usually you have to pay a money order and then include the original document that you're getting. Keep in mind that this separate document, this apostille document, is going to be attached to your background check, usually by a sticker, most likely a staple, and you need to make sure that these documents stay attached. If you separate the apostille page from the background check, and if there is any evidence that it was detached in any way, it becomes invalid. So just be careful and cautious of that when you're making a copy of all your documents, that you're not tearing those two apart and then restapling them. There needs to be no proof that it was, removed in any way. And I would say apostilles can cost anywhere from like $5 to maybe $20 a sheet. It just depends on your Secretary of State. Before we move on to the medical certificate, I'm just going to see if I can answer maybe a couple additional questions that participants have been asking. Someone is asking about where to get fingerprints done. Is this a separate process from the background check? It's just going to depend on your state. Most people can go to their local police station to get fingerprints. There might be certain states that have a specific fingerprint card they want filled out. Just follow the link for your state for the background check and see what they specify for that. Not all consulates require fingerprints, and so require fingerprint-based background checks, and so you may even be able to get away with just a name-based background check. Just double check. Your consulate will be very specific on their form whether or not they will accept it with or without fingerprints. So the other more complicated document for your visa application is going to be the medical certificate or statement of good health. There is not necessarily a specific form for this. It's just a statement on your doctor's letterhead, and it needs to be signed by your doctor that you are healthy to travel. Most consulates will have a template for you to use. However, I do know that some consulates, I believe the New York consulate does not offer one. In that case, I usually recommend using one of the consulate's templates, some of the other consulate's templates. I've looked at them all, and they're pretty much nearly identical, and so it's a safe bet to do that. Most will indicate that it must be signed by an MD or a DO, and so just make sure that you're having them sign the letter, and unfortunately not a nurse practitioner or a physician's assistant or anything like that. Just make sure that it is a medical letter signed by your doctor. Again, translations might be required for this. Definitely just check with your consulate. It'll say it. Usually, the consulates that have the example for the medical letter, they'll show it. They'll show the template. If the template has an English and a Spanish version on it, get both done and make sure that they're being printed on your doctor's letterhead. They're being signed, dated, and stamped. And then make sure that both the English and the Spanish version are being signed if that's what your consulate offers for the template. There is an example of this template in your Spain visa guide on page 13, and I can show you a sample here as well. So this is what most of them look like. Usually it's the English on top and the Spanish on the bottom, and you can go ahead and have your doctor, fill in your name, and then they would sign it, date it, and stamp it, and they would do both and have it on their letterhead. Something to keep in mind, and that I've noticed has caused a little bit of confusion. So when you're visiting the doctor, there are two things that you need to get. The first one is this medical certificate. This is strictly for your visa application, and you need this with you for your consular appointment. The other one is going to be the CIEE medical form. This form is located in your application. You print it, you download it and print it, have your doctor fill it out. It's usually just stating, the doctor's just filling out which immunizations you have, just making sure that you're healthy. And it's just for our records to make sure that, if anything were to happen to you while abroad, that we have some medical history on you and have that on file. This is not for your visa appointment. It's two separate documents. The CIEE medical form is found in your application and gets uploaded to the your CIEE application once it's complete. This medical certificate is going to be unique to your consulate, and so you're going to want to print your consulate's template and have your doctor put that on their letterhead, sign it, date it, and stamp it for both the Spanish and English if your consulate requires translations. The next document is going to be your letter of appointment. As I mentioned in Spanish, it's called the Carta de Nombramiento. And this is going to be sent to you electronically by email, directly from the Ministry of Education in Madrid or Andalusia, just depending on which region that you're placed in. The letter is going to be addressed to the Consulate of Spain, so it's not going to matter which consulate you are applying to. This electronic letter needs to be printed out for your visa appointment. It's going to state, who you are, your passport number, and what school you were placed at. It's important, and I think I mentioned this in the previous slides, that to make sure that your MyCIEE account is under your legal first and last name. So no nicknames like Sam instead of Samantha or Alex instead of Alexander. Make sure it's your full and legal first and last name. Additionally, in your account, just make sure that your passport information is accurate as well. Because, in that letter, that carta or the letter of appointment, they're going to include your passport number. I know some of you are in the process of renewing it, so just send that to us when you have the chance. You don't need to do anything to request this letter. It will be sent to CIEE participants automatically from the ministry after you confirm your placement. We do expect these letters to be sent to you, I would say, early to mid-June. Again, that's why we recommended not creating an appointment before June 18th. For your consulate. Unfortunately, as I mentioned before as well, we aren't able to speed up this process because these letters come from the ministry. We do as much as we can to encourage them and put a little bit of pressure on them to send out these letters. However, with Spanish bureaucracy, it just takes a little bit longer than we're used to. As soon as we hear that these letters are being sent out, we're going to send everybody a heads up so that you can keep an eye on your inboxes. You can check your spam boxes. I would make sure that you're adding the 2 email addresses for Madrid and Andalusia to your contacts list so that those, it's also another way to prevent them from being sent to your spam folder. And so you can see the one for Madrid and then the one for Andalusia on the screen. The next 2 ones are the documents from CIEE. This is going to be a physical letter sent to you in early June, which will be a notarized document that meets the consulate's health insurance requirement and financial means requirement. We will automatically be sending this letter to you, all participants that have confirmed their placements. There's nothing you have to do except to make sure that your mailing address has not changed and that it is up to date in your application. Okay, so I'm going to open it up for some Q&As. I know this has been a lot of information. You'll have a recording of this available to you soon. I hope this wasn't overwhelming for everybody. It's going to be totally fine. You're going to do great. This is meant now for you to input some questions in the questions box, and then I can give you some live answers here and help you. If some of your questions are a little bit more specific or a little bit more complicated and I don't answer them out loud, I will reach out to you tomorrow with more information in regards to your specific question. So it's okay if you're not getting your answer today, just know that I will email you tomorrow as well. I am seeing some questions about the medical letter that your doctor has to fill out, because in the medical letter it does mention that the participant is free of mental illness. It's going to be okay. Your doctor should still sign off of it. Things like anxiety and depression are super common nowadays, and so it's nothing that's going to deter you or make you're not going to have your visa rejected or anything like that. That medical letter is more to make sure that you don't have an illness maybe that could be harmful to others. It's making sure as long as the doctor believes that you're healthy enough to travel, they're going to sign that letter. It should not be an issue with the mental illness part. If you're suffering from depression or anxiety, I would not worry at all. You're going to be just fine with that. If for any reason there was an issue with your doctor, please let me know and we'll work it out and we'll figure something like that. But no one has ever been denied because of a mental illness in any way for our Teach in Spain program, so you'll be just fine. So for the participants that have to go to a consulate that does not mail those visa back, what do you do? How do you know that your visa is ready to be picked up? So what happens is it's going to depend on the consulate. Either the consulate at your appointment will let you know that you can go ahead and pick up your visa in 4 weeks, and they'll give you a date. August 1st or later, you can pick up your visa. Most consulates will hold on to your visa for up to 2 months after it is ready, so don't panic if they tell you it's ready and you have to fly back the next day or something. Usually they'll hold on to it for 2 months for you. Another way that the consulates reach out to you as well is via email. It just depends on that specific consulate. So they may be able to tell you right at your appointment when it'll be ready, or they may send you an email to let you know that it is ready. But just keep in mind that most consulates will hold on to your visa for at least 2 months, so you don't have to worry about picking it up too quickly. For participants that have student IDs, there should be a validity date on there. If there is no validity date or anything like that, then you should be fine. But I would say most school IDs will either have the school year that it's from or it'll valid until. So as long as it still shows the validity and your consulate appointment is within that date, then you'll be fine using your student ID. I have a question about how many participants do we have for this upcoming year. And so between Madrid and Andalusia, Madrid is our largest of the two programs. We send about 700 participants. I would say a little over 600 are going to Madrid. And so it is a very large group. There are lots of you in the same boat, all working through this together and also vying for the consulate appointments. Some participants are mentioning too the consulate appointments. Don't worry, even if they are maybe all booked up and there's only something available for August or something, book the August appointment for now to be safe, but keep checking the website. If you can get that August appointment and it's maybe not in your recommended time frame, book it for now, but then knowing that you can change it later. But keep checking the website. The cancellations will happen. Things will open up. You'll make it work just fine. Just know that you cannot have more than one consulate appointment at a time. So if you do pre-book one, make sure that you're rescheduling the other one that you created. Someone is asking about the medical letter and, the Spanish and English translation. So with the medical letter, I'll see if I can back up a little bit here. With the medical letter, it's usually on one page. It shows that paragraph on the upper left hand, which is in English, and it shows the exact same paragraph, which is on the right-hand side of the screen, is in Spanish, and it's usually on one sheet of paper. Your consulate should have a template, medical letter template that they have that you can use. But basically, your doctor is going to fill your name into both sections, and then they're going to sign and date and stamp both sections. And you're going to want them to either copy and paste it, or maybe you can email the PDF to them of the template, and then they'll print it onto their medical letterhead. Participants asking about Facebook groups or any sort of support group through this process. Once all participants have confirmed their placements, we will sign everyone up with a pre-departure online course where you will also have free open forums to chat about the visa process, to chat about housing, things like that. And so we will make sure everybody gets connected. And then again, as we move further along the process, we'll have a Facebook group as well. Asking again, I have a participant asking again about the medical letter. Do the translations have to be on the same page? They do not have to be on the same page because when you're thinking about a doctor's letterhead, obviously there's going to be probably some text or copy at the top and at the bottom, and so that whole letter may not fit on one. What I would recommend doing is having the English on one sheet of paper and having the Spanish on the other if it doesn't fit all on one page, just to be on the safe side, and then having them fill out both pages. Questions about proof of residency. Some participants, you're going to have to double check with your consulate, but some consulates will allow other forms of proof of residence. And so if you have a state ID, but maybe you moved back home somewhere else and you haven't updated that state ID or that driver's license, sometimes consulates will allow you to use a lease or a bill or something that has your name and current address on it as proof. Again, you're just going to have to double check with that consulate because I don't know the specifics on the requirements for each of those in those cases. And so just send them an email. You'll have their email addresses in the Spain Visa Guide, and you can double check with that. I have some questions about the health insurance requirement. You do not, so for U.S. residents, all participants will be signed to have coverage with our INEX insurance. Our INEX insurance is a supplemental insurance. It will cover the requirement and it will cover it for the visa. And it's going to cover you if you become ill, if you get the cold, you get a flu, if you maybe sprain your ankle, if you're traveling and your phone gets stolen, anything like that, it's going to cover you. And it is a reimbursement-based coverage. And so you would pay out of pocket for the costs, but then you would file a claim and you would be reimbursed for those costs. The things that it's not going to cover is going to be any sort of preventative care or pre-existing conditions. So if you need to get an annual physical, if you need monthly prescriptions, the INEX insurance will not cover that. And so in those cases, we recommend that you go to Spain with primary insurance as well. And your doctor, just make sure if your primary insurance will cover you while you're abroad, but then you'll be able to pay for those prescriptions and things like that. I would say you're usually going to be fine with INEX, but just to keep in mind with those monthly prescriptions or checkups and dental work, the INEX insurance does not cover dental work either. So it's not required to have primary or private insurance, but it's definitely recommended. But for the purpose of your visa application, it is not required. I'm going to open it up for a few more minutes to see if I have any other additional questions. If you have, if something pops up later, you can go ahead and send me an email. My phone number is on the screen, my direct email. If you want to set up a phone call, you can use the Calendly link on the screen as well. And then myself and my colleague Susanna also both regulate the Teach in Spain at ciee.org email, and you can use that one as well. So one of the first things that you're going to want to make sure that you're doing, if you haven't already, is scheduling your visa appointment. Whether or not you have all your documents ready, go online for your consulate and schedule it within that time frame, and then you can start working on getting your background check, getting your medical letter, all of that. For your background check and your apostille, there are ways to expedite the service. So if you are worried about not having enough time, then you will want to go ahead and do that and just pay a little extra for the expedited service. When you're getting copies of things, just a photocopy. So as if you for your background or your background check or your state ID or anything like that, it's just as if putting it on a scanner and getting a photocopy of it. That's all you need. For your visa appointment, just make sure that you're staying within those guidelines. I wouldn't make them any earlier than June 18. If you're on June 18th, that's fine. If you're in the basics program, I recommend doing it June 24 or later. But as long as you're within that time, the time frame that's recommended, you should be fine. We're confident that you're going to have all those documents by then. Your letter of appointment and your proof of medical insurance and proof of financial means, those will all be delivered to you in time, mailed to you in time. The things that you're going to want to think about is just making sure that you're staying on track with your background check and you're staying on track with getting that apostille on it. If you don't have that by your date of your appointment, then you're not going to have all your documents, and so that's on you to make sure that you're on track with all of those. So just keep that in mind when you're making that consulate appointment for the earliest possible appointment, that you're giving yourself enough time to secure all of the required documents. For the background check, and the background check is going to be related to wherever you go, whichever consulate jurisdiction you're going to be in. So if you are going to the San Francisco consulate and you go to school in Washington or Oregon, all of those consulates or all of those states are within the same, or those states are within the same jurisdiction of that consulate. And so whichever proof of residence, whichever address, if you're using your state ID and it has your state ID is for the state of Washington, then get your background check in Washington. If your state ID is for Oregon, get your background check in Oregon. Things like that. Just wherever that ID has that home address, just get it for that state. And of course, if you are ever with the background check extremely nervous, maybe you have lived in a few places and you just want to be better to be safe than sorry, you can always get an FBI background check, which is going to cover the entire United States, and so you don't have to worry about that. I have a participant asking, if you aren't in the U.S. right now, what do you do? That is a very tricky question. I would, first check to see if your consulate requires that you get your background check verified by fingerprints. If they do not require that it is verified by fingerprints, I think it's going to be a lot easier of a process for you because a lot of states will allow for name-based background searches, which you can usually do by just printing the information off and mailing it in. When you have to get a fingerprint check abroad, that can be a little bit more difficult to try to find somewhere that'll do that for you. If your driver's license that you're using has a different address than maybe your current address, but you're in the same state, that hasn't changed. It's totally fine. The consulate's not going to look at the specific address. They're just going to be looking that your form of ID is for that state, and that state is in that proper jurisdiction. The only exception would be obviously California. Just make sure that your town on your ID is the same jurisdiction for that consulate. So because California has the Los Angeles and the San Francisco consulate. So just make sure that those match. If they do, you don't have to worry about that address matching. It looks like the questions are dwindling down a little bit. I'm going to keep it open for just another minute or two. Please ask me your questions. Again, if I hadn't answered them, it's probably because they were just maybe a little bit more complicated or specific, and I will email you personally tomorrow morning and help you out with those specific questions. Other than that, I want to thank everybody for joining in and listening in. This is being recorded. I will try to get this recording out to you in the next week or two. But thank you everyone for listening in, and hopefully this has been helpful. Don't feel overwhelmed. It's going to be great. You're going to do fine. Just know that there have been years and years of other participants that have done it before you, and so it might be stressful, but it'll all be worth it in the end. See one more question quick about having primary insurance in the U.S. And does it help you or does it cover you abroad? That's going to depend on your primary care provider or your primary care insurance. You're going to have to ask your insurance company to ask them if they will cover you while you're abroad. It just kind of depends on them. All right, we're going to go ahead and close it up. Again, if you have questions, please feel free to reach out to me at a later date or at a later time using the contact information on the screen. I will do my best to help you out. You have the Spain Visa Guide. It's located under the Reading section of your MyCIEE account. At this time, you just need to make sure that you are scheduling your visa appointment if it's required by your consulate. and you are working on your background check and scheduling a doctor's appointment to obtain 2 documents. One is your CIEE medical form, which belongs to CIEE that you're going to upload, nothing to do with your visa application. The second one is your medical certificate, which needs to be on your doctor's letterhead, signed, dated, and stamped. And then double check if your consulate has a requirement for Spanish and English, in which case they will usually offer a template. All right. Thanks, everyone. You have a wonderful evening. There will be one more webinar next week, just in case you need a refresher. Other than that, have a great evening. Thank you.